So there's been a lot of press in the last few years about the danger of steel bristled barbecue brushes. And really the problem stems from the fact that when people use their brushes, they deteriorate over time and the bristles fall off, they fall onto the cooking grate, and then the next time customers go and cook, the bristles get embedded in the food and people swallow it, and then that causes all sorts of health problems and is really quite dangerous, especially for young children. And this is becoming a bigger and bigger issue as products, especially from China, get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And so we kind of set out to try to solve this problem. And of course, it was a long process over multiple years. So maybe Melanie can take us through some of the thinking behind kind of how we approach the problem, or even just how we started to think about the problem.
Anybody who's using a gas grill uses a grill brush.
Yeah.
So it was really important for us to figure out kind of what has happened to the quality of these brushes, why they're breaking down. And really we went out to the market to do that by purchasing all the brushes that we can find and testing them.
And what did you find? Did you find any brushes out there?
So not one of it didn't matter if it was a $3.99 brush or a $24.99 brush. Every single brush had bristle loss.
And how were you able to test that?
So we actually originally sought some guidance from a lot of third-party testers like Bureau Veritas and a bunch of other people to try to figure out whether or not there's actually standardized testing out there for grill brushes, and whether or not we could just kind of put a lot of these brushes through the ringer and figure out what the findings would be. But there actually is no equipment out there right now that actually does the testing that we would need. So we went out and developed it on our own.
So I believe, Greg, you were part of that development process and you actually built the testing station that we developed. So tell us a bit about the process of that and what that testing station does.
Well, we needed to know a few things about the brushes themselves. We needed to know how long they would last on the sweeping motion that a customer would use cleaning his barbecue. That was the first thing. We had to have it adjustable for weight, depending on what kind of weight would be on the brush itself. And then we also wanted to have a variable speed on it to speed it up or slow it down, depending on what we felt the true situation was out in the field.
And so we were able to test basically every brush on the market at different weights and different cycles. And you know, in a nutshell, what did we find?
We tested dozens of brushes out there. We wanted to test a lot of the stainless steel bristle ones just because they were the standard and wanted to make sure we still got a good clean. We found that the stainless steel ones, other than one or two exemptions, were very, very poor. They were the poorest performing brushes of the bunch. And
so based on the numbers that we know in the market, the vast majority of barbecue brushes sold these days are these very low cost, cheap stainless steel bristle brushes. And that really poses a big danger to the public. And, so then, did we try making a better steel bristle brush, or what was the process after that?
We started looking at the process of what we could come up with an alternative for stainless steel brushes. Health Canada was reporting incidents monthly, almost weekly in the summertime. And we felt that consumers would be looking for an alternative to stainless steel.
Melanie, I know there's a lot of alternatives in the market that don't use stainless steel bristles. So did you test some of those, and what were the pros and cons of some of those other solutions that were already existing in the market?
Yeah, so I think there's two main primary brushes out there that are considered kind of safe brushes. So you have a nylon brush that one of the downsides is that this brush can only be used on cool surfaces. So where it definitely could be potentially rigid enough to remove all the debris from a cook surface, you're really only using it when the grill is cool, which is really not the way that consumers use the product.
When do consumers typically clean their
grill? Consumers will start their grill on preheat and they will be cleaning their cooking grate.
Yeah, so isn't it typical that, I think for most users, right, they're taught almost to burn off the product.
That's right.
And then to clean right after that. So what happens to a nylon brush if you try to do that?
It definitely will melt. So if you, and again, like you said, it's it's at the beginning of the cook, and it's also at the end of the cook, right? Because usually customers want at the end, they're kind of burning off again, and they're still kind of brushing over a hot cook surface. So yeah, the bristles will definitely melt.
But I think we're not saying that nylon bristles are not effective, but I think when they can be used is limited, right? Because if they're used when a user typically preheats or at the end of their cook, you're going to run into some problems.
That's right.
So that's nylon, and what is the other materials that are used?
Would be Palmyra, so all the natural bristle brushes that are out there, which have their own challenges. They're not as rigid, so the cleaning you definitely are probably going to go through it a lot quicker. It also will burn and kind of, the bristles will break up at high temperatures as well, and with abrasion. So they do wear down quite quickly. They are safe, so if a bristle does fall off and is consumed, it's safe for the consumer. But at the same time, it doesn't do as good a job with actually cleaning and getting off the built-on grease and buildup on your cook surface.
What about those wooden paddles that seem to be everywhere as well?
Wooden paddles also are a good alternative, but the challenge with the wooden paddles obviously is that they take a long time to wear into your grates. And they also, again, because they're forming to your grates with the kind of repeated push motion, it does take a little bit of time to get to that point where they're doing the job you need.
Okay, and I think we investigated, multiple types of metal bristles as well, right? So I think there's not only the metal bristle design, there's also coil designs, there's also different ways manufacturers are using metal to clean the brush. So can you describe some of the other stuff that we found?
Yeah, one of the issues was with the stainless steel bristles, they're so small, it's hard to see them. So the coil brush, which you'll see in the market, has a much larger diameter wire on it, and it actually functions, it lasts longer, functions fairly well. It's not perfect, but it functions well. And we offer it as an alternative. And
so why not just stay there, and why not just offer different coil brushes? Like, why did we move further beyond that?
We felt that the coil brush didn't do as good a clean as what it could, and depending on the types of stainless steel you use in it, it can be rather brittle and will not move and conform to the dimensions of the cooking grid.
Okay, and then so where do we go from there in terms of looking for an alternate either design or material to develop the brush?
We wanted to look at something that would withstand heat, would also withstand abrasion, would do a good cleaning on the grill itself. So we looked at what we call pure polymer, a FDA-approved bristle that actually withstands heat up to about 650 degrees. So that allows a customer to clean his grill before he starts cooking and also clean it after.
When you say it's FDA approved, what does that actually mean?
It's important for the customer to know that the bristle is FDA approved by the Food and Drug Administration of the US. It's safe to use, so if a bristle did come off in the grill, most likely it would burn off, but if it was ingested, it's completely safe.
That's great. And so I imagine that this material is not commonplace or easy to find. So tell us a bit about what it took to kind of get the material, test it, and kind of what that whole process was.
Yeah, we basically went all over the world looking for the material. We obviously tried to source it at our manufacturing base overseas. We ended up in Europe with a couple of different companies that produced pure polymer over there. And that's where we ended up sourcing it.
And so that's where the polymer comes from today?
It's a German-made polymer.
Excellent. And so even when designing the brush, Melanie, maybe you can take us through some of the kind of iterations that we did as it related to bristle length and thickness and how stiff we wanted and why that's all important to the performance of the brush.
For sure. I think starting with the brush pad itself, obviously we wanted to consider the quickest way that customers can clean their cook surface. So a lot of basically looking at kind of a horizontal rotation versus vertical and what would be better for the consumer. So we did a bunch of kind of testing with consumers to figure out, what they enjoyed the best. and what took the least amount of time, which was actually the horizontal positioning.
When we were looking at the orientation of the brush, obviously that's one thing in terms of cleaning surface and area. But what about the bristle length? Kind of the number of bristles per almost follicle, you guess.
Yeah.
Or even the length and thickness. So, what was the process around that?
So when we started out, we definitely we were looking for, again, that the same kind of rigidity that a wire brush would have, like a steel wire brush would have, but we wanted to make sure also that it would actually still be able to not scrape the surface, but clean the surface without damaging, if it had a porcelain coating or something like that.
Now, is that something that happens? Can you actually damage a porcelain coated cooking grate?
Absolutely, you can. Yeah. So and I mean a lot of porcelain coated cooking grates. Usually, they recommend more of the nylon or the Palmera type brushes. So we really wanted a brush that would be able to be used on all cook surfaces. But again, that rigidity, comes from the amount of bristles within each follicle of the brush. So we really did play with that a lot, actually, to figure out, okay, what was the appropriate length of bristle, how many bristles we need, and even, in considering bristle loss, we wanted to make sure that this would be a brush that would stand up to the test of time,
So did you subject this new brush to the same kind of testing as you did with the stainless bristles, and did we lose any kind of bristles in our brush?
We did. We tested different lengths of bristles themselves and different orientations of them and ran them through the testing. And just to give you an example of comparison, we were losing between 20 and 50 bristles doing a stainless steel wire brush in 1,000 cycles. Thank you. We actually ran one of our brushes up to 600,000 cycles and lost 20 bristles in that whole time.
So if I could kind of summarize, it's really not only is it a safer bristle in terms of material, in terms of being FDA approved, but even the way it's designed and put into the head really tries to minimize any sort of bristle loss when using the product.
Yes, that was one of our primary goals, to make sure it was functional and safe and made of good quality and would last basically forever.
So Melanie, talk to me a bit about the actual design of the product itself. It's got a very unique kind of look and design and feel, and I think it also has some additional features on the product as well.
For sure. So the handle for sure is probably one of the nicest in terms of offering the customer everything that they would want. So they need something long that keeps their hand away from the temperature of the cooking surface as they're cleaning. So we have a nice long handle, but also again the brush pad itself and kind of that horizontal rotation that it has. Really, really nice, super easy to use and comfortable in your hand, and very durable. Like anybody who touches this grill brush is gonna say, it's likely gonna last forever. That handle's never gonna die.
And Greg, what's the material of the handle itself?
Most of the brushes that are in the marketplace right now are made of polypropylene, which doesn't have that high of a heat tolerance. We actually went with nylon, which almost doubles the amount of heat tolerance you'd get with the handle.
Obviously, I think what we've also found in our testing is that, it's kind of a trade-off, right? So I think the pure polymer that we're using, as Melanie was saying, it's a balance between rigidity to be able to scrape dirt off, but not being too stiff to potentially damage the cooking grate, but also being flexible enough that it can kind of contour itself to the different types of cooking grates, whether it's round or whether it's kind of squarish or having troughs. But what about in those conditions where you do have some areas that are really caked on or really burned onto the surface, and depending on how somebody maintains their grill, they're going to have those things on it.
We definitely included, and on all three brushes now, we do have scrapers. So you do have a standard stainless steel metal scraper that you can kind of get into those deep corners of the grill to remove any kind of buildup that you have.
That's great. What we really set out to do was make, what we feel is the safest and the best grill brush on the market, considering all factors. So from a safety point of view, from a feel point of view, from a performance point of view, we really spent about 3 years developing the product from testing to the final product. We think it's the nicest feeling brush on the market and best performing for most people, and we'd love you to try one.